I joined with Deb in 1991. I was bringing my son to her program because someone suggested that he might flourish there since he was not the sports type person. And I was fascinated at seeing someone, this African American female presence, in the midst of young people and how she could work them and get them to stand tall and proud and believe in themselves in a way that they did not even conceive. And when I witnessed her work, I thought, this girl got to be my new friend. She's got to be my new friend because of her talent, her skill, and her God given gift to be able to bring the best out in children. So, with that said, what have I observed about children? In my mind, children have had to witness violence as long as they have been living. The fact that in the 90s, when I came to Asante, we were dealing with violence in the street and police brutality and killings, public killings. And so that has not gone away. And what has to happen is that they don't become desensitized to it, that we utilize our platform to help them understand that this violence that is perpetuated or the result of racist systemic uh, racist and systemic prejudices, that this is going to be for a long time. It's been 400 years and it's going to be another 400. But that doesn't mean you yield to it. That doesn't mean you stop dreaming. That doesn't mean you give up hope. That doesn't mean that you don't live your best life and that you don't live your purpose. So we are able to help them to see that. And then through partnerships, we are able to help them attain it. So in answer to the question, I see the same. I see the same, that the children, they're more resilient, because they have to deal with subtleties, but they prove themselves conquerors of their environment.
Mm-hmm. Now, it has, for me, I have seen it has become more challenging. That's why I'll put it, because as Keisha said, it's always been going on. But with social media, with the fact that sometimes a 5-year-old will have a cell phone, they then can access this incredible, horrible viewing and information without us there to put it in context. And so they have become desensitized in a way that when we first started, where there was no cell phones and we could kind of be the news carrier. We could talk to them about, this has happened, have you heard about it? A lot of times I hadn't even heard about it, but we would talk to them and say, this has happened, and in a multi-generational forum, where that is so important, that we talk across our generations because we have different perspectives. So now they'll have this information and they have not been able to absorb it in a way that we used to be able to help them with. Now they have it, now they come to us and they may be angry about it, they may be terrified, and they don't, and it puts a stopper on how they communicate to another generation, to those below them and those above them. They are trying to deal with how they see themselves in this. And these messages. Now, the important thing that we have done, we have always done, and we will continue to do, is tell them how they, how powerful they are.
Right.
That they don't, like Keisha said, that they have a choice. They can discriminate. They have the power to hold themselves up, to stand up for themselves. They are worthy. They are worth something. So they're not reckless as they're going forward. They're not, they think before they just act upon something, because they have been reminded that they are important And even though they're young, that's a constant message with us. You respect your elders, but understand as a youthful person, as a young person, you have power, you have talent, but it's your duty to put that in the world that sustains your society, that helps the people above you who you stand on their shoulders. They have actually put you on their shoulders. Don't kick them in the head, because you'll lose that platform. So all of these things have become more challenging because we have to really be thoughtful on how we approach it. Because I can't understand. It just occurred to me that my granddaughters have probably watched the latest tragedy, because the video is out there, and it was so painful. And you think about no child has come to me to say, I'm having trouble digesting that, yet I know they are.
They are
So
crying.
that's our work.
They are crying. I heard a
Yes.
story about a young man, African-American child, 9 years old, and he has seen the video of George Floyd losing his life. And his question was, am I going to have to die? He's worried about not being able to live his life because he's worried that somebody is going to take it from him. At 9 years old, we ought to be ashamed that a child has to be thinking like that instead of thinking about playing and having fun and just being a child. So this, as Deborah said, this social media awareness has really made it very important for the work that is done about heritage and pride and thinking before you speak and not acting out of emotion all the time, that you act from a place of historical merit. Mm-hmm. And that's important.
Yeah, I agree with the challenge of social media, because you could be sitting right next to your child, your grandchild, one of your participants, and they've got their phone and you have no idea what's happening, and you're sitting right next to them.
Right.
And you can't vet the information that they have to A, help support them, but B, help them figure out if their news sources are sources that have accurate information. And how do they do that? And then they're talking with their friends, and it's an incredible challenge for parents. And I would think that that's been challenging for you to think about how you pivot, your programming in a day and age where, as you said, Deborah, you're not the news bearer.
Right.
But our pivoting includes, and before we had to do this, they cannot have that attachment to the outside world when they're inside of Asante. That has to be set aside because it's about being in a different space to allow yourself to have experiences that being attached to that phone doesn't allow you to do. So we create a safe space for exposure of the inner self.
So
and it points out the importance of commitment. We point out that you cannot be committed to this experience if you are multitasking. You're on your phone.
You can't be fully committed to any experience if you're multitasking, right? Right. I find that to be more difficult as I get older. So help us visualize, what does it look like when someone comes into your space and that they are there to experience the traditions of African and African American performing arts. And so we know when they come in, they put their phone away. But tell us just sort of what does that look like when you walk into your space and you're introducing your general programming?
Well, we establish a culture. We are tied to how important culture is and how it helps to determine a lot of things in our lives and strengthen us. And so we start to establish the Asante culture of respect, of, being fearless, of holding each other up, but allowing each other their space to be creative. We establish an age line where we talk about respecting your elders means even if somebody is a month older. If we put them in a group and something happens, the buck stops with the elder in the group. So if they're 9 and 10-year-olds and the 10-year-old is the oldest, and I come over and go, what's going on? I'm going to point that question to the eldest in the group, and they will report to me. And we also point out that the youngers have the responsibility to be respectful and take care of those who have opened doors for them. They are clearing the path before them, so they are standing on their shoulders. So that's an establishment of culture. And then we embrace knowing yourself and see yourself, be yourself, free yourself. You know, it's not being ashamed. We have moments where we go, okay, tell us why you love yourself. You know, these are things that help them to say, it's all right for me to love myself and to think that I'm something. You know, it doesn't take away from anybody else for you to love you and allow them to love them. And then we all love each other.
I love that. I think it's so important to instill that in children so they have that throughout their lifetime. I have a question of the day whenever women's fun groups gather together, and we have a group that meets just for 1 year called our Options Program. And the last question I ask them at the end of the year is, what makes you great? It's really hard for women to proclaim what makes them great. And so I love the fact that you're helping children understand today what makes them great, because that will help them know their strengths and recognize who they are throughout their entire lifetime. I love that.
I think establishing the culture to exceeds beyond just the children, because sometimes it's their parents and their grandparents as well. And when we talk about the fact that our history did not start with the Middle Passage, when we talk about how far back Blackness goes, and that we reign, we are the products of kings and queens, and we are the seeds of those who survived the Middle Passage, which means we have that survival instinct in us to see a barrier, to see an obstacle, and to figure out how to overcome it. So when talking about the greatness of the history and the traditions of the people and the village, that we're responsible to each other, for each other, and we should be about each other, to talk about and enforce put downs. You can be in the room and I can disagree with you, or you can make a mistake, but I shouldn't laugh at that mistake because you're being human and you may be testing ground. So having a space where a child or an adult does not have to worry about somebody poking fun or talking down, being condescending or being mean to them, that doesn't exist. And that then allows a person to open up, not only to themselves, but to those around them. So the importance of our history is paramount in making sure we understand it. We teach the Kwanzaa principles and we talk about how to live by them 365 days a year, 24/7, that you're thinking about these principles that are guiding not just for us as a people, but for all people, because they're not steeped in culture so much that no one else can embrace them. They're very, very commonplace and make common sense.
I knew that for those of you who are listening in, I said that the company that's supposed to redo my driveway was going to come as soon as this started. And I apologize for the noise in my dog. I can put myself on mute after I ask this question. I would guess that not everybody who is listening is familiar with Kwanzaa or the principles. Could you just briefly highlight that so people understand?
Well, the Kwanzaa principles, the Nguzo Saba, was that whole concept of Kwanzaa was created by Dr. Malana Karenga back in the 60s as a response to a way to create a culture where Black people could acknowledge and celebrate themselves. So it's based on the African principle of first harvest, first fruits. So it talks about unity, it talks about self-determination, it talks about cooperative work and collective responsibility. It talks about cooperative economics. It talks about living your purpose. It talks about creativity and faith. So 7 principles that you can look at, and it's always interesting when you present them to people to then say, how would you incorporate this in your life? How do you see yourself carrying this out? What can you do differently? Sometimes they're doing it already, but not realizing. But other times they're not aware of it. And to remind people that Kwanzaa is not a replacement of Christmas. It's not about that. It is a separate cultural event for African Americans, not Africans, but African Americans, to celebrate being Black in America.
Thank you for sharing that, because I know that probably a lot of people have heard about it, but really don't understand what it means. So thank you. One of your operating principles is to preserve the tradition of African and African American performing arts. So tell us how you do that. And I'm also curious, when you tell us about that, is this something that you find is new to the children that you work with, or do they come with some knowledge of this?
Well, I think that we translate what as culture. I'm a person who believes that culture has such a importance and impact on our lives and how we live it. So in the community, there are practices that families don't even know where they came from. So when we connect them to things like Kwanzaa or performance, storytelling, then they begin to connect those things to what they are already doing. So we're strengthening them. It's not like a complete departure. It's just it informs them and gives them more importance. Like there was this whole thing about Ebonics and how people talk. When we have discussions about that, the way you speak does not denote how smart you are. It just says where and how you were educated. So that we don't judge, because I've run across people who don't want to embrace dialect, and there's some very important historical work that was captured in dialect. And so if you throw that off, if you don't want to embrace that, you're cutting yourself off from a rich legacy of work. So when we are working with the children, that's part of what we are getting them to do, is to open their minds up to what has value in their own lives, so that they're not always reaching outside of themselves or thinking that they have to validate themselves in ways in order to feel worthy.
I would also like to say Deborah is unique in that she can create plays that have historical connections that can provide information to our young artists that they will not be exposed to in school. But when they hear it, when they hear glimpses of it in school, now they're equipped to ask questions. There is nothing like knowing who you are and being grounded in who you are, so that people who talk to you and maybe say, oh, well, you Black, but you're ignorant, or you're Black and you don't know anything about it. It's like, no. You can listen with ears of discernment, because you know what you know, and you know where you came from, and you know why you're here, and you know your greatness. that you're this thing that you're carrying inside of you. No one can shake you from being balanced and grounded in the world.
Sorry.
So Deb has produced plays, and this started from the 1990s after we did The Wiz, that this thing about paying out royalties is not for everybody. we learned a valuable lesson from that.
Oh,
but
man.
Came from it was now taking issues that matter to us, social issues or social times, and then taking that and turning it into a work that is now meaningful and that can send messages or start conversations that would not have taken place. And I say that there's a piece that we're working on right now, Fighting the Good Fight. That was something that she wrote. And Dreamfire, which is funded by the Women's Fund, that these were taken and adapted to the stage, and the kids and their parents and their grandparents, they walk away from these experiences so elated because we have informed, we have inspired, and we have encouraged them to even seek more. But see more with new understanding and through a lens, through your Black lens, and it's okay.
I love that.
Fighting I've got to make something clear. Fighting the Good Fight is written by young directors under my tutelage. I came up with the idea of, and then asked them to write vignettes on different chapters in the civil rights era, and very, very impressive with what they have come up with. And that is also something that is encouraging to know that what Keisha is describing, being able to look at the issue and then put it in a theatrical manner that artists can access, and that in itself creates a forum for them to have come to a better understanding on the issue or the historic moment or the cultural heritage of it. That is ongoing now. Because we have said, I want you to write, because I had been pulling my hair out writing stuff, and that's suddenly turned to these facilitators and said, okay, here's the subject, I want you to write it. They were like, what?
That's such a gift though.
Right, and then they did it and they were so proud of themselves. They're like, I did it. I'm like, yep, and you're gonna do it from now on.
That's fantastic. So when you mentioned Dreamfire, I thought that was a great pivot for us to talk about the Sankofa paradigm. So when you first learned about the grant opportunity with Women's Fund, I'm curious about what inspired you to apply for funding, because I mean, obviously any organization is going to see stars and when they see $750,000, yet you're not an organization that people would think of as a mental health provider. So tell us about what that spark was like to apply for funding for the Sankofa paradigm.
Well, when you think of these terms, crime prevention, mental health provider, those are labels and terms that people use to, quote, put certain systems or characteristics in a box. If you look at the Asante model, we prevent crime because the kids do not have time nor inclination to go out and do anything, because we've put something different on their minds. And the mental health piece, we do not say that our children need mental health services. We know that they need help. We know that they need to be lifted. We know that they need to be cared for, because these are Black children living in a white world, and that is traumatic on a daily basis. Every day they wake up, they have to think about it and hope that they get home from school that day. Just living life, everybody needs help. So aside from that, what you do then is come in and say, okay, we get that, but now how are you going to be your best self? We get that all these things are going on, but what can you do to help somebody else be their best self? We understand, but don't live in your pain. Don't stay there. Use it as a springboard to do something different, to do something bigger, to find out and live out your God-given purpose, because He did not put you here just to sit and wallow and hold yourself. He didn't put us here for that. We're supposed to make a difference in the lives of our families and the communities that we live in. That's why we're here. So this project, when it came about, Community Solutions, and I love the fact that that's their name, Community Solutions approached us to say, what did we think? And to be able to have a puzzle to come together like this, that was powerful and it was innovative. We do what we do, and we've been doing it for 30 years. And now to do it with support, that's when the magic happens. That's when the impact is deeper, because we have been operating without this level of support. But look what happens when organizations or entities that serve the community are invested in. And
And,
that's, Women's Fund.
and so often Keisha had said to me through the years, they think we just do theater. They don't get what we're really doing here. They don't, things would happen and we would see breakthroughs and see encouraging things, and telling the story was never enough.
Seeing our kids in other theaters.
Yeah. Well, that's part of what we are here for, to strengthen them to go out. I recently we had a guest from IRT, and he was talking about auditions for our kids. And I pointed out to them that their connection with this guest should broaden their network, because they are in an arena when they come to us, it's flipped. Most theaters, when you go to the theater, it's the play. The play is the thing. Well, with the Asante Children's Theater, they are the thing. Developing them as an artist is the thing. The play is secondary. That's why we create the play around them so often. That's why we think about what this group of children need, and then we come up. So a lot of times I'm pressed by Keisha. What are we doing 2 years from now? What are we doing? And I'm like, well, I don't even know, because it really is driven by what the kids are facing and what the kids are showing to us when they come to us. So I like that flexibility,
That's a sign of a true leader, when you can have that flexibility to know what the right thing is, that you don't have to have a box for everybody to step into. Mm-hmm. So describe the Sankofa paradigm. That's the name of the program that Women's Fund is supporting. And the name alone would not describe it for most people.
Well, Sankofa is a principle, and it means to go back and fetch what is yours. So part of the strategy is, in building these young ladies and building their confidence, is to teach them their history and to help them to understand what Sankofa, the principle, is about. And that we have to, in order to move forward in an effective, efficient, positive way, we have to stay connected to our past. We cannot just walk around here and go, "Oh, I'm tired of hearing about slavery. Oh, I'm tired of hearing about," and you don't want to know the story. I don't want to hear about lynching. I don't want to hear, is that all we did? No, you might not want to hear about it, but you definitely need to know about it, because you might not see it in the way that it happened then, but you are definitely seeing it now. And you need to know that those parallels and that repetition is existing. And if you're going to impact it and change it so that it is different, or that it doesn't happen anymore, you better understand how complex and how many layers there are in it. So the Sankofa, that's the Sankofa piece, tying them to African traditions and tying them to culture. The paradigm is switching how people perceive mental health. And that everybody don't, to just look at people and say, "Oh, this child needs mental health services." No, maybe they just might need some love and care. Maybe they just might need to know that a village is looking, watching, and expecting from them to be their best. Maybe that's what they need to know. maybe they need to know that there's going to be a brighter future for them. And that to do it the way that Asante does it, that's the important piece.
And maybe they need a room for self-discovery in a safe place,
Mhm,
in a forum that is multi-generational,
mhm.
so that when we first got word that this dream, because that's what I thought of it when Keisha said she was writing a grant, I was like, dream on. And then when the dream came through, I was like, oh my God, we get to do this. Oh my God. So
I really wish that I could have been like Ed McMahon and rang your doorbell and told you in person with a big bouquet of balloons, because I have to tell you that we were probably just as excited as you are for Women's Fund to discover something that was so unanticipated. And that when we were talking about emotional well-being, it made sense that we heard from some of the hospitals and some of the traditional mental health providers, and then some that you wouldn't expect. But we certainly didn't expect to hear from Asante Children's Theater, and I just couldn't wait to open that up when I saw that we had it, to see what you had to offer, because I'm so well aware of the tremendous impact that you have been making for a long time. But I think that you are really underappreciated in our community.
And
And I hope that our funding will help lift up and shine a light on the work that you're doing, so more people can appreciate the tremendous impact that you're having. And with that, the impact, so tell us about the girls that you think that will participate over the next 3 years, and describe what kind of commonalities they might have, and barriers to participation, and what you hope changes. I think we have a feeling of what you hope will change based upon how you've described your work so far.
Well, when it was first announced that we got the grant, we did some interviews, and reporters were pushing the line of, okay, now these damaged, traumatized girl, and I had to say, whoa, because I think that all children need a place to discover themselves, to be safe, to test out those things about themselves that they are hesitant to reveal. And so then when they find out, well, this is, yes, it's different, but it's special, or it's important, it's mine, and it's okay that it's not like yours. I think everybody benefits from that. Now, the fact that, and we have been doing that, we've been doing that for years, but the fact that we are now in a position where we can have mental health partners to be there, and other partners at Boys and Girls Club that bring children to them anyway. And sometimes they're all there, and it can be overwhelming to partner with someone like that. And IUPUI, the occupational therapist, she's already done work that using drama to really deal with traumatized people. Now, the girls that I'm seeing, yes, some have had some very traumatic, but not much unlike the children that I go into schools. And it's not like they are I don't think that the girls we are seeing are traumatized to the point where the mental health person is the person they need to see. I think that they're all in jeopardy. Does that make sense to you? I think that some of them have gone through trauma, and if we're not careful, some of them will go through trauma that they haven't gone through, or some of them will continue to be traumatized. And what I think we are doing is we are becoming a system that is putting armor on them or telling them where their tools are and letting them know they are worthy of the fight. To live is to struggle.
You talked about some of their commonalities, their color, because we know all children can benefit, but children of color are starting not on a level playing field. So they need to have more opportunity. More of the village has to support them to even get them to the point that they're equitable. And even at that, they still may not have the chance to progress at the same level, at the same degree. So we know children of color need more help. We know gender is a commonality, and we know girls of color are going to be dealing with different barriers and different obstacles. Sometimes it is economics. Sometimes it might be their neighborhoods. They may be living in a neighborhood that's being gentrified. They may be living in a neighborhood that has been labeled because it has high violence and high crime going in it. But then they may also come from a middle, what is it, como se dice,
Middle class?
Yes, middle class or higher class where both parents are in the home type thing. And they still may need the opportunity to come together with other girls like them to talk, just talk and to be. There is nothing like being with your own. There's nothing like it. And we hear that when we have orientation and we're starting a class. The first thing you see is they look around and see, my goodness, everybody looks like us. Wow. Wow.
I imagine that just immediately takes a weight off of their shoulders, right? To be with people that share a common story. So tell us, as we're winding down, can you give an example maybe of some exercises or activities that you do with the girls that help them create trust with each other and then start building towards the work that you're going to be doing?
I would say the age line is the first trust.
Yeah.
That age line is the first activity that they kind of don't get, why Deb is asking them to get in line without speaking, finding out who's older than whom, and then taking them through that exercise. I would say that's the first one, but she's got a whole bag full.
Yeah, but one that really stands out, Alicia, who is one of my facilitators, led exercise on Sankofa. It was like a puzzle where, and I hope I can do it justice, where she put down these little cones and you had to move forward without moving the cone or, okay, they had to, it ended up that they had to teamwork and use what they had behind them to get them forward. And it was such a good way to capitalize on Sankofa. And so after they did it, when they were bringing the cone forward, but they were passing it with each other, they had to look back in order to get that. And then they had to pass it on to go forward. I told them about Sankofa as a mother and grandmother, that things that I had taught my son, I saw him pass along. And then some certain things that now that I was a grandmother, that I thought I could build better on, I was able to pass that along to my granddaughters in a way that my son could not. And you know when people are listening, because their eyes, you see them populating the story with their eyes. And those girls, it was a moment for us in Sankofa. We were all like, just like listening, and then they jumped in and said, like, my mother did this and da 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 da. And I said, yes, what is that? Sankofa.
It must give you so much joy when they get it. right? For
Yeah.
anybody who's a teacher or a coach or a parent, when they get it, it's just, it's so exciting. So COVID-19, which it seems like 100 years ago, right? Because that's all we could talk about all day, every day. And now we haven't even talked about it for over a week now, but it clearly changed your plans. And I
Oh,
know that
baby.
you've been delivering programming virtually. So give us just a quick highlight on how that's working, because that was a big pivot.
It was a big pivot, and it was devastating to me across the board, not only with Sankofa, but with all our program at Asante Children's Theater. And I nearly died. I want to just lay down and kick my feet. I acted real ugly, pouty and grieving, but my Sankofa girls got me through.
Oh.
I did not believe that this was going to work. I said, okay. Everybody was like, well, what we gonna do? What we gonna do? And I was busy pouting. And then I said, okay, we'll do this Zoom thing. Now, our numbers, we had, I think, 30 girls to maybe 35 when we were meeting in person. But then it came down to 5 girls when we were on Zoom, which was disheartening to me at first. And I thought, wow, because there were girls in person that we were making differences with that were big. And I mourned that. But throughout this process, I've also come to the realization that the progress that we did make with those cases that were there is not lost. And it's something that we'll be able to pick back up on, because this is a pilot. This is one we'll be coming back to, I'm sure of. Mm-hmm. But then on Zoom, the girls that stayed with us have stayed with us in a way that is going to be so compelling. After this project, this is a project that they will be able to hold with them. And it'll, it'll go on. And the girls who were in our live, we're making a point to make sure they see this project, because they are part of it. Before the shutdown, they were given a script. So the script in itself brings up conversation. And we did have some conversations around the script. So some good work was done. But now through the Zoom project, we're going to create a virtual piece that will be able to stay with them all their lives. Now, I will say that on Zoom, we were able to do exercises like, I love myself because, I love myself because, I love myself because, and then each person would say what they loved about themselves. And that's been a favorite. And the girls really like that. So we still do that kind of work, and we still touch in on how are we feeling. We always have a touch point of what's the forecast. And we say that in different activities of getting to find out how are they doing before we go into the work online.
And being able to work virtually has also given us an opportunity for parent engagement that was unexpected.
Yes.
That we have 2 mothers who are involved, and Jennifer, they're in the script. They're part of the production.
Fantastic.
Yes, so to be able to watch what has happened differently, we had a plan, and the plan had to be altered. But look at all of the fantastic opportunities that came from it that we can now build on when we move to the next site. And I say that to say, I hope that the Women's Fund can see how important your support is to furthering this work and helping the work to continue. This in the writing and putting the grant together and being able to read what we're actually doing. I attribute a lot of that to Mitzi from Community Solutions, being able to hear what we're saying and hear and see what we're doing and put it in a language that people get, that we are doing more than just plays for children and plays with children. It was important to understand the depth of our process and what is so distinctly possible as a result of it. And that we try to figure out how to model this and make it more available to other young girls.
I love that. So we just have a couple minutes left, and I want to ask you one question briefly, and then I'm going to wrap it up with some women's fun things, and we'll end right at 1 o'clock. So because the performing arts are not available to us live right now, do you have a piece of work, whether it's a book or a poem or a movie or a play that somebody can find online, that you would recommend to people that, you know, you need some performing arts right now? Go look for this.
I've got one, Just Mercy.
Oh, yes.
It's a movie about Brian Stevenson, the civil rights attorney. And what impressed me, I'm a movie buff. I skate through movies and stories and books. But what impressed me about this film is that it really focuses on his perseverance. He moves through the pain and the cruelty of what has happened and what is being done to solve the problem. I was inspired by the way that portrayal just kind of, you know, he did not let it destroy him. So often that's what's happening, is
Right.
the horror of it and the pain of it we can't get past to be productive. And in this story, this man, and he's still with us, so I hope people are giving him flowers now. His tenacity, you know what I'm trying to say?
Tenacity.
Yes, thank you. Is just moving. He just will not let go, and in a way that is productive. So it's uplifting in that way. It's horrifying what the story it's telling, but it's uplifting to see somebody move through it with such power.
It's available for free right now, which is, and I highly recommend that too. But I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to give Keisha a chance to answer that really quickly, and I'll wrap up.
Shaka Zulu, the story of how Great Britain invaded South Africa and the Zulu tribe. If you want to see something and see what they did, and the story behind people coming in and trying to colonize you and tell you you're not, you need to change your life, and we're going to take you over and change you so and make you assimilate our civilization because we're right. To go and look at that and then think about times that are going on now, because those parallels are still happening.
I will add that to my list, I promise, and watch with my family. So I want to wrap up by saying thank you. And I also want to wrap up by saying to the white people who are listening, if we're called to be anti-racist right now, but we're also called to recognize and own our own history and not expect our Black and brown friends and colleagues to teach us. They're tired, they're exhausted, and it's not their job. And so we have to be responsible for that. And at CICF, we've been engaging deeply. And I wanted to share this book, White Fragility, is fantastic, by Robin DiAngelo, and it's a super resource. The movie 13th. We all listen to the podcast Seeing White, which is on Seen on Radio. We'll put these resources on our Facebook page. And then also, I read this book last summer, Between the World and Me, and then just this week, I listened to the audiobook, and Ta-Nehisi Coates read it. And to hear him speak his truth to his son, this is a letter to his 14-year-old son, was harrowing, and we have to own that. We have to be respectful and allow our Black and brown friends, neighbors, and colleagues to lead. If you want to protest, you're joining them, you're not leading them, that you need to respect what they have to say about how things go. They might want you to be at the front of the line, they might want you to be at the back of the line, they might change their mind in the middle of the time about where you're needed. Take time to look for resources about what makes attending a protest safe. My daughter who's 20, said to me last weekend on Saturday when she wanted to protest, and I was like, "Ooh, last night was a little dangerous." And she said, "Mom, how do you think Black mothers feel every single time their children walk out the door? If it's dangerous, we should be there." So I went with her and her friends, and that's a different story. So if you're going to be a white ally, be smart. Don't be the leader, be the follower, and educate yourself so you can do the best job you can to help dismantle racist systems. And you're certain to make mistakes, and when you're authentic, people will give you grace. I appreciate your support of Women's Fund. I appreciate the fact that you joined us today, and deeply, deeply grateful to Deborah and Keisha for the work that you're doing and the fact that Women's Fund can partner with you. It's a great honor for us. So thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who joined us during your lunch hour today. I hope that you enjoy the sun outside, and then if in your life it's storming, that you find a rainbow finds its way to your soul.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, be well.